Imagine a frozen world where survival hung by a thread, where every movement, every decision could mean life or death. Now picture how dramatically everything changed, from nomadic hunters constantly on the move to settled farmers tending their fields. How did humanity make this enormous leap? Welcome to the journey that altered the course of history forever, the transition from the Paleolithic to the Neolithic age. For tens of thousands of years, our ancestors wandered the earth as hunter-gatherers, completely dependent on nature's unpredictable bounty. They followed animal migrations, gathered seasonal plants, and lived entirely at the mercy of their environment. But approximately 10,000 years ago, something truly extraordinary happened. A perfect storm of climate changes, social transformations, and groundbreaking new technologies revolutionized the human way of life. This wasn't just another chapter in human history. This was the moment humanity stopped merely surviving and began actively shaping the world around them. Did you know that this transition happened independently across different continents at different times? From the Fertile Crescent in the Middle East to parts of China, Mexico, and Peru, humans around the world began to discover agriculture on their own. It's as if humanity collectively reached a tipping point, one that would forever change our relationship with the planet. The story of this transition isn't just about food or shelter, it's about the birth of civilization itself. When humans put down roots, literally and figuratively, they created the foundations for everything we recognize today. Villages grew into cities, simple shelters evolved into architecture, and the first sparks of organized religion, government, and written communication began to emerge. If you love history and want to unravel the mysteries of the great empires that would later rise, hit the like button. Subscribe to the Dawn of Humankind channel and never miss an episode. Join us as we explore how a species of nomadic ape descendants transformed into builders of pyramids, inventors of writing, and creators of art that still moves us thousands of years later. It all began with the end of the last ice age. Around 12,000 years ago, our planet started to warm up in one of the most significant climate shifts in human history. The vast frozen tundras that had dominated the landscape for millennia gradually gave way to lush forests and sprawling grasslands. Imagine the wonder of our ancestors as they witnessed entire ecosystems transforming before their eyes. During the Ice Age, massive ice sheets covered much of North America and Europe, reaching as far south as modern-day New York and Berlin. As these glaciers retreated, they carved out valleys, lakes, and rivers that would become cradles of early civilization. This wasn't just a slight temperature change. Average global temperatures rose by about 6 degrees Celsius, completely reshaping the world our ancestors had known. This global warming, entirely natural and occurring over thousands of years, became the trigger for a series of dramatic changes that would transform human life forever. As the climate stabilized, plants and animals that humans had hunted and gathered became more predictable in their locations and behaviors. For the first time, our clever ancestors could observe patterns reliable enough to experiment with. In places like the Fertile Crescent, the arc of rich land stretching from Egypt through the eastern Mediterranean to Mesopotamia, wild grains began to flourish in the new climate. Our ancestors noticed that dropped seeds grew into new plants, a seemingly simple observation that would lead to the most revolutionary idea in human history: agriculture. Here's something fascinating. Those first farmers became so efficient at growing food that they produced more than they needed for basic survival. This food surplus was the true game changer. For the first time in human history, not everyone needed to focus on finding food every single day. This allowed some people to specialize in other activities, crafting tools, creating art, developing religious practices, and yes, even waging war. Think about that for a moment. For hundreds of thousands of years before this, virtually every human who ever lived had to participate in food gathering almost daily just to survive. Now, suddenly, a potter could trade vessels for food, a priest could perform ceremonies in exchange for grain, and a warrior could protect the community's resources. This division of labor sparked by agricultural surplus would eventually give rise to every complex society that followed. In the highlands of what is now Turkey, archaeologists have discovered Göbekli Tepe, an astonishing site with massive stone pillars carved over 11,000 years ago. What makes this discovery so revolutionary is that it predates settled farming in the region, suggesting that perhaps religion and monumental architecture came first. and farming developed to support these new cultural activities. This flips our traditional understanding on its head and makes us wonder, did we settle down to farm because we wanted to build temples rather than building temples because we had settled down to farm? With the climate now more stable and predictable, humans began to notice something remarkable. They could plant and harvest their own food. Imagine that moment of revelation when someone first realized that the seeds from wild grains could be deliberately planted and would grow into new plants. This wasn't just a new survival technique, it was the birth of agriculture, perhaps humanity's most transformative discovery. Evidence suggests this revolutionary idea emerged independently in multiple regions around the world. In the Middle East, people began cultivating wheat and barley around 10,000 years ago. In China, rice domestication started around 8,000 years ago. In Central America, corn became the foundation crop roughly 7,000 years ago. It's astonishing to think that different groups of humans, separated by vast distances, all stumbled upon the same world-changing concept. The magic of agriculture brought with it the possibility of settling in one place. No longer did humans need to follow animal migrations or seasonal plant growth. They could create their own food supply right where they lived. The first permanent settlements were modest clusters of simple homes, often near reliable water sources that could irrigate their precious crops. One of the earliest known towns, Jericho in modern-day Palestine, dates back to around 9,000 years before Christ. Its inhabitants built impressive stone walls not just for defense, but as protection against seasonal floods. Think about the shift in mindset this represents. From people who moved with nature's challenges to people who built permanent structures to control and overcome them. This transition to farming didn't just change what humans ate. It fundamentally transformed their entire social structure. In hunter-gatherer societies, people generally shared resources equally. There simply wasn't much opportunity to accumulate wealth when you had to carry everything you owned. But with agriculture and permanent settlement, the concept of personal property emerged. The land itself became valuable, something that could be owned, inherited, and fought over. A fascinating aspect of this revolution was the dramatic shift in human diet. Archaeological studies of human remains show that early farmers actually had worse nutrition than their hunter-gatherer ancestors. They became shorter in stature and showed more signs of disease and malnutrition. Their diet became less diverse, relying heavily on a few staple crops instead of the varied plants and animals their nomadic predecessors enjoyed. So why continue farming? Because it offered something even more valuable than perfect nutrition: security and the ability to support larger populations. As agricultural techniques improved, communities grew beyond anything possible in the hunting-gathering lifestyle. Where a hunting territory might support a band of 20 to 50 people, the same area under cultivation could feed hundreds. Villages expanded into towns, and the foundations of complex society were laid. For the first time, not everyone needed to be involved in food production. This allowed for specialized roles: religious leaders, craftspeople, traders, and eventually, rulers. The relationship between humans and the natural world had been forever altered. Rather than adapting to nature, humans began adapting nature to their needs. They selected wild plants with desirable traits, deliberately breeding them to create more productive varieties. Wild wheat that naturally scattered its seeds was replaced by varieties that kept their seeds on the stalk, useless for natural reproduction, but perfect for human harvesting. Wild animals were domesticated not just for meat, but for milk, wool, transportation, and labor. This wasn't just change, it was transformation on an unprecedented scale. The agricultural revolution set humanity on a new path, creating the foundation for everything we recognize as civilization today. Cities, writing, metallurgy, monumental architecture, organized religion, social hierarchies, all of these followed in agriculture's wake, building upon the revolutionary idea that humans could produce their food rather than simply find it. Agriculture demanded entirely new tools and technologies. Imagine trying to dig soil, plant seeds, and harvest crops with the same crude stone tools used for hunting mammoths. Our ancestors quickly realized they needed to innovate, and this necessity sparked a technological revolution every bit as important as the agricultural one. The most visible change came in how stone tools were made. For hundreds of thousands of years during the Paleolithic age, humans had crafted tools by striking one stone against another, creating sharp but fragile flaked edges. But with the dawn of the Neolithic, a revolutionary new technique emerged: stone polishing. By patiently grinding and polishing stones against harder surfaces, our ancestors created smoother, more durable cutting edges. These polished stone axes, adzes, and hoes were perfect for clearing forests and tilling soil. A single polished stone axe could fell a medium-sized tree in under an hour, a task that would have been nearly impossible with earlier tools. Some of these polished axes were so precisely crafted that archaeologists initially mistook them for metal when they were first discovered in the 19th century. But perhaps the most transformative invention of the Neolithic period was pottery. Think about it. Hunter-gatherers had little need for heavy, breakable containers when they were constantly on the move. But once people settled down and began producing surplus food, storage suddenly became crucial. How could you save your harvest for the winter months? How could you protect precious seeds from moisture and pests? Pottery provided the answer. By around 7,000 years before Christ, many early farming communities had mastered the art of creating clay vessels that could be hardened in fire. The oldest known pottery comes from Japan, dating back over 16,000 years, suggesting that even before full-scale farming, some hunter-gatherer groups were experimenting with this technology. These clay containers weren't just practical, they were also beautiful. Early potters decorated their vessels with intricate patterns, creating the world's first ceramic art. And here's something fascinating. Archaeologists can often identify specific cultural groups by their unique pottery designs. Each community developed its own artistic style, like a visual signature that has lasted thousands of years. The innovation didn't stop there. Our clever ancestors also invented grinding stones and mortars for processing grain, weaving techniques for creating cloth from plant fibers, and new hunting weapons like the bow and arrow that were more efficient than earlier spears. Each innovation built upon the last, creating a snowball effect of technological development. One of the most ingenious technologies was irrigation, digging channels to bring water from rivers to fields. In Mesopotamia, between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, early farmers created networks of canals that turned desert into farmland. This wasn't just digging ditches, it required careful planning, maintenance, and cooperation among hundreds or even thousands of people. The coordination needed for these irrigation systems likely contributed to the development of the first organized governments. Did you know that these early farmers became so efficient with their new technologies that they produced more food than they needed? This surplus was the key that unlocked human potential. It allowed some people to specialize in crafts, trade, religion, and eventually writing and science, rather than everyone working just to feed themselves. If you're enjoying this video, please hit the like button, share it with friends who love history, and subscribe to the Dawn of Humankind channel for more incredible stories about our shared past. And let us know in the comments, do you think agriculture was humanity's greatest invention? Or would you nominate something else? The wheel, writing, the internet? What do you think was the innovation that changed everything? With agriculture came one of the most profound social transformations in human history. For the first time, people could own something that didn't exist before: land. Think about it. How do you own a hunting territory when animals move freely across it? But a field that you've cleared, planted, and tended, that became something you could claim as your own. This concept of private property changed everything. In hunter-gatherer societies, sharing was not just virtuous, it was essential for survival. If a hunter made a kill, the meat would spoil before one family could consume it all. So sharing with the group made perfect sense. But with agriculture and food storage, suddenly accumulation became possible. Some families might have better land, work harder, or simply have better luck with weather, allowing them to store more grain than others. Archaeological evidence from early farming villages tells a fascinating story. The earliest Neolithic settlements show remarkably equal housing, similar-sized homes with similar artifacts inside. But by 5,000 years before Christ, we begin to see dramatic differences. Some houses grew larger, contained luxury goods, and were built in desirable locations, while others became smaller and simpler. This physical evidence reveals the emergence of social inequality, something rarely seen in hunter-gatherer groups. One of the most revealing sites is Çatalhöyük in modern-day Turkey, a settlement that existed around 9,000 years ago. Early homes there were nearly identical in size and contained similar burial goods, suggesting relative equality. But over time, Certain buildings became larger and contained exotic materials like obsidian mirrors and rare shells from distant locations. This wasn't just architecture changing, it was the social fabric itself. As some individuals accumulated more resources than others, the first social classes emerged. Those with surplus wealth could commission specialized craft goods, employ others to work their fields, and eventually claim leadership positions. In Mesopotamia, we see evidence of professional priests emerging around 6,000 years ago, individuals who didn't produce food but instead performed religious ceremonies in exchange for support from the community. The need to coordinate increasingly complex activities, irrigation, grain storage, conflict resolution, led to the emergence of the first leaders. Initially, these might have been respected elders or those with special knowledge. But as societies grew larger, more formal systems of governance developed. By 5,000 years ago, in places like Egypt and Sumer, we see the first kings, individuals with enormous wealth and power who claimed divine connections to justify their elevated status. Here's something fascinating about these early leaders. Many of them gained their positions not just through force, but through their ability to organize cooperative projects. The archaeological record shows massive public works like defensive walls, irrigation systems, and ceremonial centers that required hundreds or thousands of people working together. Whoever could coordinate such efforts became naturally powerful. These social changes were reinforced by new religious ideas. Hunter-gatherers typically worshipped nature spirits or animal deities that reflected their close connection to the natural world. But agricultural societies began to develop more hierarchical religions, with powerful gods who controlled the forces that mattered most to farmers: rain, fertility, and the seasons. Temples became centers not just of worship but of economic power, collecting and redistributing agricultural surplus. One of the most poignant transformations was in gender relations. Evidence suggests that in many hunter-gatherer societies, women and men had relatively equal status, with different but equally valued roles. But with agriculture, we see signs of increasing gender inequality. As farming became more dependent on physical strength for plowing and clearing land, and as warfare between settled communities increased, male physical strength became more highly valued. Property, often associated with land, typically passed through male lines, further reducing women's economic independence. The world was transforming from small bands, where everyone knew each other intimately, into larger, more anonymous societies, where your place in the hierarchy determined your life possibilities. For the first time in human history, the circumstances of your birth might determine whether you would be a ruler or a laborer, a priest or a farmer, wealthy or struggling. The stage was being set for the emergence of the first true urban civilizations, with all their achievements and inequalities. With food surpluses securely stored in pottery vessels and grain silos, something unprecedented began to happen. Human populations exploded. Imagine the transformation. Where once the land could support only a handful of hunter-gatherers, now hundreds or even thousands of people could live together in one place. This demographic revolution gave birth to the world's first true cities, forever changing the human experience. Jericho, nestled in the Jordan Valley near a natural spring, stands as perhaps the world's oldest continuously inhabited urban settlement. By 9,000 years before Christ, it already had a population of around 2,000 people living behind massive stone walls that stood nearly 13 feet tall. These weren't just simple defensive structures. They included a stone tower over 28 feet high with an internal staircase. The labor required to build such monumental architecture speaks volumes about how organized these early urban societies had become. What would it have been like to walk through ancient Jericho? The houses were circular, built partially underground with domed roofs made of mud brick. Streets were narrow and winding, with homes packed tightly together. The dead were often buried beneath the floors of houses, sometimes with their skulls removed and decorated with plaster to create lifelike facial features, a haunting practice that suggests complex beliefs about ancestors and the afterlife. Or consider Çatalhöyük in modern-day Turkey, another remarkable early city that flourished around 7,500 years before Christ. Home to as many as 8,000 people, it presents a bewildering urban layout to modern eyes. The houses were built so close together that there were no streets at all. Instead, people walked on the rooftops and entered their homes through openings in the ceiling. Imagine an entire city where every journey meant hopping from roof to roof. descending ladders into your destination. Inside these homes, we find walls decorated with some of humanity's earliest paintings, hunting scenes, leopards, and strange abstract symbols. Many houses contained small shrines with figurines of women, bulls, and other animals that hint at complex religious beliefs. The inhabitants of Çatalhöyük kept their city remarkably clean, with designated areas for trash disposal and even primitive toilet facilities, early examples of urban planning. As impressive as these early cities were, they were just the beginning. By 5,000 years before Christ, cities in Mesopotamia like Uruk and Eridu were growing to truly impressive sizes, with populations exceeding 10,000 people. These later cities featured temples built atop massive platforms called ziggurats, specialized craft districts where artisans worked, and the first evidence of writing, clay tablets marked with pictographs to record agricultural surpluses and trade goods. These urban centers became melting pots where ideas, technologies, and cultural practices could spread rapidly. Innovations that might take generations to travel between scattered villages could now be shared across a city in days. This acceleration of knowledge exchange led to an explosion of creativity and invention. Metallurgy, mathematics, astronomy, and eventually writing all emerged from these dynamic urban environments. But city life brought challenges as well. Living in close quarters with thousands of others created serious health problems. Archaeological evidence shows that urban dwellers often suffered from diseases rarely seen in hunter-gatherer populations: tuberculosis, cholera, and other infectious illnesses that spread easily in crowded conditions. Their teeth showed more decay from eating processed grain foods, and their bones revealed signs of malnutrition and physical stress. Perhaps most challenging was the social navigation required in these new urban worlds. For the first time, humans lived alongside strangers, people they weren't related to and hadn't grown up with. This required new social norms, rules for behavior, and methods of conflict resolution. The earliest legal codes, like that of King Urukagina of Lagash around 4,400 years before Christ, were attempts to establish clear rules for these complex urban societies. The city represented a completely new way of being human. No longer were people defined primarily by their kinship connections and hunting territories. Instead, occupations, wealth, and social standing became central to identity. A potter in Uruk might have more in common with potters in distant cities than with the priests or scribes living next door. This specialization and interconnection laid the groundwork for the complex civilizations that would soon emerge. Civilizations that would build pyramids, develop writing systems, and create empires. Life would indeed never be the same again. The Neolithic Revolution may have happened thousands of years ago, but its legacy surrounds us everywhere we look. Take a moment and glance around you. Virtually everything you see, from the food on your plate to the city outside your window, from the words you're reading to the very structure of our society, can be traced back to those pivotal changes that began roughly 10,000 years ago. Agriculture, the cornerstone of the Neolithic transformation, remains the foundation of human civilization. Even in our digital age, farming continues to occupy nearly 40% of the world's land surface. The crops domesticated during the Neolithic period, wheat, rice, corn, potatoes, still make up the bulk of human calories worldwide. When you eat bread, you're consuming a food that has remained fundamentally unchanged since it was first baked in stone ovens in the Middle East 8,000 years ago. What's truly remarkable is how few new crops we've domesticated since then. Nearly every plant you eat was first cultivated during this ancient revolution. The wheat in your sandwich, the rice in your stir-fry, the corn in your tortilla, all gifts from our Neolithic ancestors who patiently selected and bred wild plants into the productive crops we know today. Even the apples, oranges, and other fruits we enjoy are distant descendants of fruits first cultivated during this period. Cities, another Neolithic innovation, have become the dominant human habitat. For the first time in history, more than half the world's population now lives in urban areas, a percentage that continues to grow. The fundamental concept of the city, a dense settlement with specialized occupations, centralized governance, and cultural institutions, remains unchanged since it first emerged at places like Jericho and Çatalhöyük. We've added skyscrapers and subway systems, but the basic urban pattern established in the Neolithic endures. Consider writing, which developed directly from the administrative needs of the first cities. Those earliest clay tablets from ancient Sumer weren't used to record poetry or stories. They were inventories of grain, livestock, and land ownership. The need to keep track of who owned what in increasingly complex societies gave birth to this transformative technology. Though we've swapped clay tablets for digital screens, we're still using writing for many of the same purposes: to record, remember, and communicate across space and time. The social structures established during the Neolithic continue to shape our lives in profound ways. The concept of private property, the idea that individuals can own land and resources, emerged during this period and remains a cornerstone of most modern economies. Social hierarchies, specialized occupations, and formal leadership, all Neolithic innovations, continue to define how we organize ourselves. Even our relationship with time changed forever. Hunter-gatherers lived primarily in the present, responding to immediate needs and opportunities. But farmers must think in seasons and years, planting in spring for fall harvest, storing food for winter, saving seeds for next year's crop. This long-term planning, this ability to defer immediate gratification for future benefit, became encoded in the cultures that emerged from the Neolithic and continues to shape our psychology today. Here's something fascinating to consider. The genetics of modern Europeans reveal that they descended primarily from three distinct ancestral populations: hunter-gatherers who arrived during the Paleolithic, farmers who migrated from the Middle East during the Neolithic, and pastoralists who came from the Eurasian steppes during the Bronze Age. The Neolithic farmers didn't just bring new technologies, they brought their genes as well, reshaping the biological makeup of entire continents. The religious and spiritual ideas that emerged during the Neolithic continue to influence belief systems today. The concept of powerful sky gods who control the weather, so important to farmers dependent on seasonal rains, appears in religions around the world. The ritual calendar, marking planting and harvest times, evolved into religious observances that still structure our year. Even modern religions that seem far removed from agricultural concerns often preserve metaphors and symbols from this period: bread and wine, seeds and harvests. However, alongside these incredible innovations, the Neolithic also bequeathed us challenges we still struggle with today: social inequality, conflict over resources, environmental modification, and infectious diseases all intensified during this period. Many of our most pressing modern problems, climate change, biodiversity loss, economic inequality, have their roots in patterns of human-environment interaction that began with the first farmers. The Neolithic Revolution wasn't just a chapter in our distant past. It was the foundation upon which all subsequent human history has been built. From the pyramids of Egypt to the skyscrapers of modern cities, from ancient empires to modern nations, from early writing to digital communication, all emerged from the transformative changes set in motion when our ancestors first planted seeds and watched them grow. The world as we know it began in those first Neolithic fields and villages, making this perhaps the most consequential revolution in the human story. The transition from the Paleolithic to the Neolithic stands as one of the most pivotal moments in the entire human story. In just a few thousand years, a mere blink of an eye in evolutionary terms, our species fundamentally transformed its relationship with the natural world. The warming climate at the end of the Ice Age created opportunities that our ancestors seized, launching a cascade of innovations that would forever alter the trajectory of human history. Consider the scale of this transformation. For roughly 200,000 years before the Neolithic, humans lived as hunter-gatherers in small, mobile bands. Our tools, social structures, and ways of understanding the world remained remarkably stable across vast spans of time. Then suddenly, in the geological equivalent of an instant, everything changed. We settled down, built permanent homes, domesticated plants and animals, created villages that grew into cities, developed writing, established formal governments, and laid the foundations for everything we call civilization. Each change triggered others in a remarkable domino effect. Agriculture led to food surpluses, which enabled population growth and specialization. Cities concentrated human creativity, accelerating the exchange of ideas and innovations. Writing allowed knowledge to be preserved and shared across generations. Complex social hierarchies organized human activity on an unprecedented scale. Together, these innovations unleashed human potential in ways our Paleolithic ancestors could never have imagined. Yet this great transition came with profound costs as well. Our health initially declined as diets became less diverse and diseases spread more easily in settled communities. Social inequality emerged and intensified. The natural environment began its long transformation under human management. Warfare became more organized and deadly. Every blessing of the Neolithic brought corresponding challenges that we still grapple with today. This raises a fascinating question. Would humanity have reached our current level of technological achievement without the Neolithic Revolution? Could we have built modern civilization while remaining hunter-gatherers? Some anthropologists suggest that certain hunter-gatherer societies, particularly those in resource-rich environments like the Pacific Northwest of North America, were developing complex social structures and impressive technologies without agriculture. Perhaps they represent an alternative path that history might have taken. Or, consider this thought experiment. What if the climate hadn't warmed and the Ice Age had continued for thousands more years? Would intelligent, resourceful humans have eventually found different paths to complexity? Or would we still be living in small bands, following the migrations of animals across tundra landscapes? The intertwining of climate change and human innovation that characterized the Neolithic raises profound questions about our past and our future. What do you think? Could humanity have reached the stars without first planting seeds in the earth? Would we have developed computers without first creating cities? Or was this agricultural revolution an essential step in our collective journey? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments section below. As we conclude this journey from the Paleolithic to the Neolithic, I hope you've gained a deeper appreciation for this extraordinary chapter in human history. The foundations of our modern world, everything from the bread on your table to the city outside your window, can be traced back to those first farmers who dared to plant seeds and wait for them to grow. Their legacy surrounds us everywhere we look, a testament to human ingenuity and adaptability. The story of human prehistory is filled with such fascinating turning points and unexpected twists. If you've enjoyed exploring this crucial transition with me, please hit the like button to help others discover this content. Share this video with friends who love history, archaeology, or simply good storytelling. And be sure to subscribe to the Dawn of Humankind channel for more explorations of our shared prehistoric past, from the first tool-making humans to the rise of ancient civilizations.